All right. I think we have just gone live. So, all right. We'll get started here. I just wanted to first start, welcome everybody out to Town Hall Thursday. This is going to be the last one that we have before the general elections. And so we're going to be kind of transitioning after this election on November 8th. And I would like to be doing some more town halls, but obviously for different purposes. We've been holding them for candidates, so that everyone can get to know the candidates and kind of get their messages out there. But I think we're going to be transitioning more towards how the party can truly help in the community and how we can promote our principles. But today we're going to be hearing from Jordan Tusher. Now, actually, I can explain really quick. I think originally we had announced Anthony Loubet would be with us. Anthony actually was not feeling well today, so we're gonna skip him today. We can have him back another time. Anthony's amazing, and he's the current candidate for House District 27. So Anthony, hope you feel better, and we'd love to have you another time. But we're going to start with Jordan Tusher, who is a candidate and is a current sitting House of Representative. And your current House is 47, right? I always get them confused with all the changes.
Yeah, it's actually 42 right now, but it's moving
42. I'm sorry. Yeah. There's too many to keep track of. So yeah, and you're going to be 44 after this election. So basically, once you're sworn in January, and so Jordan is running again, obviously. For the House, and he's been amazing. And so we're going to hear from him. And then after Jordan, we're going to hear from Dan Sorensen, who is running for Senate District 14. And so he'll be joining after Jordan. But a couple other notes. If you're joining on YouTube or on Facebook, if you make comments, I'm going to be watching for those. And so, in other words, if you if you have questions that you want to pose to the candidates live, I will do my best to repeat those questions to them and ask them, and hopefully we can get an answer during this episode. So the other thing is, if you ask questions later on, I'll also try to forward those on to the candidates to answer those questions later. So if you're watching after this live event, then we'll also try to get those answered. The other thing is, hey, we're a party. We're all volunteers. Nobody makes any money in the party. I know that's probably surprising, and the party runs on donations. And so to be able to do things like this and to be able to get good candidates like Jordan and Anthony and Dan, we need donations. And so I ask everyone to help us out, help promote our principles by going to Salt Lake County GOP website, and that's at slcogop.com, and donate. Right, we need that, and that's how the party functions. I'd love for everyone to become an E-Club member, which means that if you donate, you can either donate $5, $10, or $25+ a month. If you donate $10 a month more, or $10 a month or more, then you become part of what we call the E-Club Luncheon invitees. And so we invite you to join us with an elected official every month. Jordan, you've been invited a couple times, I think, and so we sat down. You get to talk about what's going on in the legislature, and you can, as a member of the E-Club Luncheon team group, you get to ask the legislators questions, and it's a really good opportunity. I've learned a lot about all the processes and all the different positions within the government that way, and so encourage everyone to do that. But let's get started. First, like I said, I introduced Jordan a little bit, but Jordan, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running again, and take it from here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate being on here. I'm a proud E-Club member as well, and so hopefully we'll get a few more members in there, and we can continue to help great candidates get elected. Like Anthony Loubet, I'm sad he's not on here tonight because he's a good friend and just a great candidate, great guy, and we wish him the best of luck in his race. I also want to say it's an honor, I guess, to be here on the last of these town halls for the party. When you were announcing that, I wasn't sure if I should be really feel privileged or maybe feel a little sad that I was kind of the afterthought. But actually, I
not an afterthought, I promise.
No. I actually was planning on being on an earlier one, and you guys accommodated my schedule when I needed to move it. So thank you so much. And I just have to say how impressed I am with the county party in the last 2 years. It has been just a night and day difference from when I ran 2 years ago, from the support that we're getting today. And that's really a credit to the leadership that you've done, Chris. Really grateful for Jared and Karma and Japheth and the whole team and the ledge chairs and Senate chairs, everyone. It just seems like there is a renewed focus in trying to get good candidates elected, preserve our conservative values in this part of the county, and really for the past couple decades we've seen lower numbers of party attendance, participation, et cetera. And so to see this resurgence and great leadership means a lot and will really help us in the future.
Thank you so much. And I'll just say most of that is owed to our volunteers. We have an awesome team, like you mentioned some of them. There's so many I can't even begin to tell you, but thank you so much for that positive comment.
It's really true. I don't just say that. I am thoroughly impressed, and I think we'll see the fruits of that next week. As we have some really critical county seats, some in the state legislature, some countywide seats that I think we're going to raise some eyebrows in the way that we've been able to come out and have turnout and make a big change in this county where we need it. So to introduce myself just a little bit, like you said, I currently represent House District 42. That district is representative of kind of the southwest part of the valley. So I represent the west side of South Jordan, kind of just a piece of the north side of Harriman, and the southwest side of West Jordan. With redistricting, as you mentioned, I'll be in House District 42, and that district, because we've had so much growth out in this area, has really shrunk. I lost a lot of the West Jordan area that I really loved, a lot of good friends and people that now will be represented by Cheryl Acton, as she moved a little bit south. And I moved just a little bit east in South Jordan. So my district is probably 90% South Jordan, 10% West Jordan. And I just represent sort of the very south end of West Jordan, just everything that's sort of south of 90th South, out to about Bangerter Highway. I love this area. I grew up in this area. I grew up in South Jordan, just off the Glenmore Golf Course. Went to Welby Elementary, Elk Ridge Middle School, graduated from Riverson High School, and just have a real passion for this area and the great quality of life that I had as a kid. And that was really the motivation that I had when I wanted to run. And I came back here. I wanted my family to grow up in the same area, and I saw the threats and changes that were happening. I saw, the massive amount of growth that we have out here. And I felt like, man, if we don't make the right decisions right now, my kids aren't going to have the same opportunities that I had. And so how can I get involved? How can I make a difference so that they have the quality of life and childhood that I had, just not that long ago in the same area. And so we had a great representative before in Kim Coleman. When she decided to run for the U.S. Congress, I threw my hat in the ring and ended up getting elected. And it's been a great honor to be able to represent this area.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that you have a background here. You're not just somebody who's, just moved here and you're, trying to jump into politics. You're somebody who actually, have a vested interest. And I think that's really important. I know that some of the other representatives are the same way. And I love that. I feel like I've been here 10 years. I'm starting to feel that way. I know that I'm going to be here for a lot longer, and I'm going to have grandkids here. So I really appreciate people like you stepping up and helping to make this area better. So thank you. So
absolutely.
Tell me, there's so much to talk about with you because you're always running some really great bills, and I love what you've done. So tell me, what are the big issues right now that you're working on? What are some of the things that you're working on as a legislator?
Yeah, like I said, there's so much, and it's interesting in being in the state legislature, and just every day there's some other issue, some area, and you can't be an expert in everything, and so you try to learn what you can. You rely a lot on your constituents, the problems that they're hearing, the experts out in the field, other party members, people you trust, and try to figure out where can I make a good difference. And there's so much being thrown at you. We have a 45-day legislative session. I think last year we had about 1,200 bills that were filed. Just over 800 of those were actually drafted into bills, and we passed over 600 bills in those 45 days. Now, some of those bills are, a word change here or there, and, just trying to make some small tweaks. Some of them are really big changes that will make a big lasting impact on a lot of the people. So I'll say, maybe in preface to your question, when we looked last year in preparation for the general session, we got together and we said, what are the key areas that we need to focus in? And we identified 5 main areas that we focused on. Number 1 was water, right? We're in a drought, a long, extreme drought. We've got to do something about that. Another one, and I hear this from my constituents all the time, is affordability, right? Their house value has gone way up, but it means that their kids can't afford to live anywhere near them. They may be in their basement and stuck there for a really long time. We have just increasing costs all over. And I think that's even compounded now as we look at the Biden inflation that we're getting here, and the increase in gas prices and, everything else that we're living in. I mean, it's just a very different world, and we need to find ways to continue to make our community one where it's affordable and we can afford to live here and not just sell all our houses to people from California and move somewhere else. The third thing that we looked at was education. How can we modernize it? How can we make it more transparent? How can we provide a better student parent relationship in the whole framework of education? And we passed some good bills around that. The fourth one was about maintaining the Utah way. I represent a large area of Daybreak where we have people moving in from all over the country, right? Texas and Arizona and California and such. And people came here because they love Utah. They love the environment that we have, the great family life, the nature and trails, and just everything that's great about our community. And then it disappoints me when they move in here and then immediately it's like, but we want to change all of these things. And so as we talked about that as a caucus, we said we need to make sure that we put in good guardrails in place to make sure that we continue to have that Utah way maintained. And then the last thing that we looked at last year, because we had such a big surplus of money, is how can we take that money, some of it coming from the federal government that our grandkids are going to have to be paying back, how can we invest it in such a way that will make a generational impact? And so you saw that in where we looked at transportation and water and other types of roads and long-term development plans and things where it's not just something we're going to see here next year or the year after, but it's something that our kids and our grandkids will be able to participate in. So those were our 5 key areas. As we look forward now and kind of talk about what are the biggest issues, they haven't changed that much. I'll tell you that.
No,
I think
haven't.
like I said, we made some great progress in the last year to move down that road. Doing tax cuts to make things affordable, putting a lot of different emphasis on water and housing affordability, giving more funding to teachers, and setting up programs for paid professional hours for teachers and early literacy education and things like that. We created some new state parks and programs around public infrastructure and helping our state parks that were just completely overrun during the pandemic. And then, like I said, these big generational projects that we have. But even still, as we go back and look at what do we need to do this next year, I think it's those same things, right? We're going to be talking about water. We're going to be talking about energy. And especially in light of the Biden administration and just the attacks on, our coal and natural gas and natural resources that we have in the state, how can we preserve those? How can we continue to provide those jobs and clean energy for all of the citizens of the state? Another big one this next year that we'll be talking about is tax cuts. You're going to see some pretty big surplus numbers that we'll have coming in from the state. A lot of that, our fiscal analysts are going to come back and say, you know what, we don't think this is sustainable. We think that this is sort of one-time money because of all the federal stimulus that's come into the state. And so we're not going to appropriate that money in a way that will incur an ongoing obligation to the state. We'll look at it as one-time money
That's
that
smart.
we can fund a project here or there with, but because there'll be so much of it, there'll be a lot of opportunity, whether it's transportation projects or parks projects or ways that we can conserve water, and making sure our rainy day fund obviously is maintained. So as we hit a recession next year, that we'll be okay, and we won't have to do any big massive cuts to our budget that are going to affect.
Well, hopefully you're going to be able to find ways to spend the money that will reduce our costs in the future, right? I mean, I've seen that a couple of times, you know, since I've been chair, where there's been issues where maybe some spending in the past was done with the idea that, oh, we'll just raise some taxes later, or we'll raise that funding later, and then no, you know, all of a sudden it sneaks up on everybody, and they go, oh my gosh, now we got to raise funds, and I won't get into it, but I think that that's something that, you know, as a legislator, you hopefully you've got your eye on that, and if these monies come in, you can pay off. I don't know, you know, I know that there's sometimes where you can use the money to pay off some debts and different things like that, and other times you can't, just because of the way the money's, you know, handed over. But hopefully that you guys can find that as much as possible. I'd like to make one other comment too. You brought up, and then I'll let you go again. But you brought up the issue of housing. And it made me chuckle because my daughter just called me. She just got married just a couple months ago, and they're up at BYU, Idaho. And she calls, well, she didn't call, but she texted. And she says, I can't find an apartment that is that's affordable, even in an area that, you know, it may not be the nicest area. And she, you know, she wants to live in a nicer area. She's like, Dad, it's not a great area, but I still can't afford it. And then she goes, and then I'll find an apartment that you can't make, if you make too much money, you can't live in those apartments. And it's like she's stuck right in between, right? And they're just not in there. They're in a situation where they just can't find an apartment because of this. And so they're still looking, but it's an interesting situation to be in, where either the apartments are too expensive, or you can't make more, or if you make too much, you can't live in them. And it's just it's a weird situation. And you know, how do you deal with that? How do we help them out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we really have been struggling over that. You know, we just had a affordable housing summit last week to talk about these challenges that we're having. And you know, on one side we're seeing, you know, just huge increases in interest rates. They're going to make it harder and harder for people to qualify for homes. On the other side, we're starting to hear from those that are building homes that they don't have as much interest, right? So that's going to cause some temporary, you know, snag on that housing market and probably bring down costs. What I'm afraid of is it's going to spook all of the home builders. They'll stop building houses for a little while. We'll wait this recession out for a year or two, and then we'll be back in the situation where we have a huge shortage of homes, people looking for them, and that causes a skyrocket in the cost of housing. And so, you know, there's part of me that's like, yeah, we have a problem, but let's not be too confident that government is the right way to solve the problem, right? Let's, because more often than not, we try to, you know, stick our nose in things, and we cause more problems than we create solutions for those problems.
I think everyone agrees with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, from my perspective, it's what regulations do we have in government right now that is making it harder for houses to be built? You know, are there certain regulations? You know, I love local control. I think it's extremely important. But sometimes when you start to have that NIMBYism, you know, not in my backyard approach, cities will put pretty high restrictions on the types of houses that can be built, where they can be built, et cetera, that make it hard for people to be able to afford homes. Now, that's not to say that, you know, we need to have high density housing everywhere. That's not the right approach at all. We need high density where it makes sense, where we got transportation and you know, good freeways and everything to be able to support that type of an environment. And we need single family homes, and we need starter homes, and we need, you know, homes that are more expensive. And so we have to have the right balance. And I think cities are trying their best to figure that out and have the right zoning for it. But there are things that we can do. You know, last year, one of the things that we looked at, and I think we'll continue to look at, is for a long time, cities were not very incentivized for putting in a lot of housing. They'd be much more focused on bringing in a Walmart or a Costco or something, because that's going to increase their tax base.
Tax dollars.
Whereas the houses sort of are a wash. Yeah, there's going to be some tax dollars that come in, but then there's all these municipal services that have to increase, and they balance out, or sometimes it's even a deficit. And so they're all fighting over these Walmarts and Costco's and not really thinking about the long-term housing, or how can we make it work better in the community. And so we made some changes to say, all right, rather than doing this tax increment financing for these large big box stores, how can we tie that back to having a good plan for housing? Not telling you how you have to do it, but making cities really think about long-term. What is your city plan? How do you present that? And I think that has been a really good approach. I've heard from some city leaders that it's made them have some difficult conversations. And I think that's one way that we can look at solving things like that. But it's a really, really tough issue. Transportation, we've got to keep up with all of the building and everything. And you fill that out in Harriman, I fill it in South Jordan. And I think we've done some really good things in having the funds appropriated now to convert Bangerter Highway into a full-on freeway. So you're going to start seeing some more construction. 98 South will be that next interchange that they're getting ready to convert into an interchange, get rid of the stoplight. 134th, that's coming along, doing the environmental impact. And man, that's going to be a huge benefit to your area. I can't tell you how many times I drive past that, and there's just cars like a mile long.
It's crazy. Yeah, I can't. You have one little accident, and you're the time it takes to get home during a rush hour can go, turn into 3-4 hours. It's crazy.
Yep, exactly.
So, yeah.
So, but there's little, one of the things that I was really interested in is how do we fix our east-west? And for the most part, UDOT's approach is, well, if we do better north-south, then east-west will get better. But I think there's more that we can do than that.
Yeah,
and so looking at maybe 90th South, to have a similar approach like we have at 5400 with some flex lanes, or other kind of corridors that we can have that get us out to I-15, other than going south on Bangerter or north on Bangerter, or having to sit through all that traffic going east-west and all the stoplights. So there's things that we can definitely do there, and hopefully we'll have some good representation. I love my colleagues in the southwest part of the valley, really in the whole valley, but we're just so aligned on these issues. We understand them. Our constituents are all saying the same thing, and we can get together and we can be a good front to make sure that the overall state infrastructure dollars are coming out to our area where the highest growth numbers are.
I'm glad you guys are working together on that, because I think historically it feels like we've been kind of forgotten, right? We're paying all the taxes, but we're not benefiting from all of that as much as we probably should be. But anyway,
it's totally true. And Chris, I have to tell you, whenever like a lobbyist or another lawmaker calls me and they're like, hey, let's get to lunch, I want to talk to you about something, I always force them to come out here. And there's some of them that are like, you know what, I haven't driven like east of I-15 in like 10 years, and they're just shocked at the growth. And that's what we need. We need people to see what we have out here, because they hear about it, but they don't understand the massive growth we've had in our part of the valley. So it's important.
Yeah.
Abortion, that's going to be a topic coming up. I think part of it is we're looking at the courts and what they're doing, how they're handling the current laws that Utah have. But even still, I think there's some cleanup that needs to be done on our abortion statutes. Just so thrilled with what's happened in the Supreme Court and the return of federalism in our country, and the ability for us to be able to figure out what's best for our state. But there's definitely some things that we can do to make that clearer for people, to protect the unborn, and ensure that there's no loopholes. So I was talking to Senator McKay last night. He's got some ideas. He's working with Representative Lisenby and Representative Birkeland, and so we'll see some legislation on that. Transgender issues. We saw a little bit of that last year in talking about preserving women's sports. I think there's more momentum to continue to look at it in the legislature and say, what do we do about gender affirming care? Do we allow for psychologists to kind of ask the question, is there something more beyond just, you want to transition? And is there a way that they can talk about, are there depression issues? Are there other things, instead of just affirming what a minor would come in with. Hormone blockers has been something we've been talking about for the last couple of years, but I think there's been more and more research to show the negative effects of those hormone blockers on minors. And I think we'll see some legislation around that. And also sex change surgeries for minors. I think we'll see the state take some action on that. And so it will be interesting to see that dialogue and finding the right balance where we show, love and compassion for those that are struggling with transgenderism, while at the same time ensuring that long-term irreversible decisions aren't being made by 12, 13-year-olds that may feel differently when they're 18 or 19.
I'm really glad to hear that. And I just
Yeah.
on that point, nothing is more important to me than family. And unfortunately, I'm familiar with a couple of situations where some of those decisions had been made early on with hormone blockers, and I can tell you it's devastating as they get older. And so I'm so glad to hear you say that. And we really do care about these people. We're not trying to, at least from my opinion, I think you guys are doing the right thing. At least the representatives that I've talked to are doing the right thing there. And wait for them to be adults and make those decisions. Don't make adult decisions as kids. And I thank you so much for taking that on, because that's a tough one. It's really hard.
It is a tough one. And, the newspapers and, Twitter sphere make it sound like, we just lock ourselves in a room and we come out and we think we know what's best. But it's exact opposite. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours Representative Birkeland spent working with Equality Utah and trying to find the right solution so that we could have a compromise and that she understood everything and we could send the right message, but it never gets reported on. And so I know you understand that, but I hope everyone understands that this is something we don't take lightly. We listen to all the experts. We listen to every side. We spend countless hours trying to understand the issue and make the best decision that we can. And we don't always get it right. We come back the next year and we, fix things. But again, it's not decisions that are taken lightly in any respect.
Yeah.
ESG is going to be a big one. We just have established 4 working groups on different areas of legislation where we really need to take some action at the state level. And so I assume you've talked about that on other podcasts, or maybe had Treasurer Oaks in here. Really does a great job in explaining the issue and is fighting for our state. But you'll see a number of bills. I think I heard there were something like 30 bills that were filed on ESG. And so now we're just trying to narrow them down and hit at the key aspects so that we can make sure that people are protected in our state from that really dangerous trend. The flag is another one. I know there's a lot of mixed opinions on it, but it's going to come up in the next session for sure. And we'll decide whether or not we'll move to a new flag or not. But there's still plenty.
Well, can I ask your opinion on that? Or would you rather not say?
That's what
it's funny how controversial that is. I mean, I think I'm kind of one of those people who feel like certain things are just tradition, right? Some things are principle, very, very important. And I would never give up on certain principles, but the flag is a beautiful thing, but it's still tradition, right? And it's like, I feel like, wow, it's funny how controversial that is.
Yeah.
So what's your thought?
Yeah, strong opinions on both sides. I came into this probably like a lot of people who, on their first blush, they're like, why are we doing this? It's just really the best use of our time and resource. The flag's fine. And I'll say I love the symbolism in the current state seal that we have on the flag. But as I've learned more about the issue and I've talked with those that are passionate about it, I've really bought into the idea that our flag really doesn't represent our state in the sense of our ingenuity and the creativity that we have and everything. It really, what we did is we took our state seal, which is amazing, and we put it on a blue background. And there's 25 other states across the country that have flags that look almost identical to ours. And you can't really, if you're 20 feet away and you're looking up at them, you don't know which state is which state. And so if we can come up with a flag that is really truly representative of them, that incorporates the principles of flag design and makes people feel more proud to be Utahns, I'm all for it. Whether we found that design or not, I'm not sure. When I first saw the 30 designs coming out of the task force, I was like, really? That's it? I will say though, when I saw, a little icon on my screen and looked at it compared to when I was at the Capitol and I saw where they had printed it out and, 3 feet by 5 feet, there was a big difference. And I saw someone like, oh, okay, that's actually not as bad as it looks, or that one, I could see that one. And there's little things I like about all of them. And I know they're working closely with designers and the public and trying to find something that will be really great. And I'm just hopeful they come and present that to us and I'll be able to vote for it.
Yeah. Well, if nothing happens, I'm okay. But at the same time, I'm with you. I actually do understand the value of that. I think there's everything from tourism to just recognizing, what Utah's about. Our current flag, like you said, if you take the name of our state off of there and you compare it to, like you said, 25 other flags, you can't tell the difference between them. Yeah. And I actually did that with some people and just asked them which one's the Utah flag. And most of them couldn't tell. So it's interesting. Yeah. So I know, and I'm gonna get yelled at for that, and so are you. Sorry, I even brought it up.
No. It's one of those things. So those are the big issues. Let me just tell you in the last couple of minutes that we have here, some of the stuff that I'm personally working on that is really important to me, and I think will be big. One thing I will tell people is I've always had a policy that I make my bills public online. So if anyone's interested in what I'm working on, a lot of other legislators is the same way. You can go onto the legislative website, you can look up my name, you can go to this session, and it will list, the names of all the bills that I'm working on. And anyone that, wants to have more information about it, just reach out to me. I'm happy to share information because I truly believe the more collaborative we can be about it, the more transparent, we're going to get better legislation. And so there's nothing that, is secretive or I'm hiding or I'm waiting till the last second to publish. It's all out there. That being said, I haven't quite learned the skill of narrowing my scope and the bills that I'm working on. So there's a lot on there. Hopefully by the time session comes, I'll really have it narrowed down to, 10 or 15 bills that I'll be working on. But let me just mention 5 that I think are really important. One of them is last year, I worked with some other legislators to pass a bill that set up a task force for blockchain and digital innovation. And I was appointed with Senator Collimore as the co-chair of that task force. And we've been working with some amazing people that are just really experts in this field on how we can ensure that we have the right framework and laws in place to allow that group to thrive and Utah to be one of the leaders in the nation in blockchain and digital innovation. We already have some companies down that have established in Silicon Slopes, but we really, like we do for an industrial banking or other types of industries, we could be the United States leader. Right now, Wyoming's taking the lead, and no one wants to be in Wyoming, to be honest. People want to be here, but they're establishing companies in Wyoming just because they've taken the time to put the right framework in place. And so we're working closely together to get a number of bills ready for the session that will put Utah in the first place for digital innovation in the country.
Can I ask you something about that really quick? Because I think a lot of people, I'm in the IT industry. I think I understand the value of that, but I think a lot of people don't understand the real value of what you just said. Can you maybe dial it in a little bit more and explain where, how that affects our lives day to day going forward?
Yeah. And I'll preface that by saying I'm in no way an expert in this space. I recognize that this is the trend and we need to get ahead of it and really be leaders in the space, but there's other people that can explain it a lot better than I can. But I'll say, just like, let's say at the beginning of the 2000s, when we had the internet revolution, right? All these websites coming on, we kind of call that this Web 0.1. And then kind of the move, 10 years later to, digital phones and apps in Web 0.2, blockchain is Web 0.3. And it's as revolutionary as any of those other things from moving from no internet to internet, or from no phones and apps on your phones to phones. It will change everything that we do. And it's a technology that will allow us to get rid of a lot of the third-party reliance that we have. If you want to validate something, you go to an expert or a government agency, or you get a stamp on a paper, or there's other companies set up to make sure that things work. The technology will allow individual parties to be able to transact in certain ways without having that middleman. And so there's just so many applications for it, whether you talk about cryptocurrencies or government records or the financial institutions and loans. And I mean, just it's endless how much it's going to change what we're doing. So one of the bills that I'm working on is establishing a new type of business organization called a DAO, or a decentralized autonomous organization. They exist right now, but there's not really a good framework in the law of how we treat that in Utah. Anyway, just cutting to the point, I think if we have that legislation in place, that this will be the mecca for DAOs across the nation to want to register. And so I'm really excited about that. I know our time's really short, so maybe I'll just mention two others. One, I have several election bills that I'm working on. We've talked about these, Chris. One that deals with how do we solve the plurality issue in primary elections, whether we have a runoff and how we approach that. And so if anyone's interested in where we're going with that, I'm happy to explain it. And then another to look at, how can we strengthen our caucus convention system? And one of the ways that I think we can do
that's what's in that's my number one as chair. That's what I'm always,
Well, it is so important. And to be honest, I'll tell you, without the caucus convention system, I wouldn't be here as a candidate. And there's so many other people that, it just, without it, it turns into, how much money do you have? How much can you throw at it? How much of the establishment is behind you? And that's it. The caucus convention system allows the people to actually have a voice. And I will continue to fight for that however I can. So I've got a proposal in that would raise the threshold, but if someone gets a certain threshold within convention, it would eliminate the signature gatherers. I think I can get consensus on this bill, and I'm working really hard on that. And I'm excited about some of the freshman legislators that are coming in that have reached out to me and pledged support. And then the last one I'll just give you a teaser on that I've been working on is restrictions on social media for minors. This is something that I think is really important as we talk about the major problems that we're seeing from our youth in mental health and suicide, and even into transgenderism and some of these other social issues. I think the stem of that is just this unregulated atmosphere of what's happening online and these minors' access to social media. In fact, studies are coming out right now that show that kids that get on social media at 13, 14, 15, it chemically changes their brain and the way that they're wired in a way that can't be changed, right? It's as harmful to them as alcohol or smoking or other drugs. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a state to say, what do we do about that? How can we help control that? How can we help parents in their efforts to help their kids be functioning members of society? And so I'm working closely with some members of the Senate, the governor, in coming up with what the right approach, the Utah approach to solving that. I think we'll be one of the leaders in the nation in looking at this issue and making sure that our kids don't or aren't really lost. We don't lose this generation because we just allowed unfettered access to social media.
Yeah, no, those are really, really important topics. Like I said, I especially like the caucus, anything we can do to make the caucus system stronger. Honestly, that's the only reason I'm even in the party today. I moved here from Arizona 10 years ago. I left the party in Arizona. I was so frustrated with the way it worked. They had a signature only system. They didn't have a caucus the way we see it today. And I left the party. I came here and I learned about how Utah does caucus. And I realized this is true representation. You can get out and you can get to know the people running. You can have a direct influence on those individuals or on who's going to be representing the party. And once I understood how it all worked, I was just blown away. And that's why I'm here today. So thank you so much for that. And I totally agree with you on the social media. I just really appreciate everything that you're doing. You're one of my favorites. I probably say that to everybody, but you really, I think you've done a fantastic job. And so we do need to transition over to Dan Sorensen at this point. But I did want to say I failed. I apologize. There was a question that I didn't notice until we were pretty far into this from, I don't know if I should, I guess it's online. So Mark Allen posted a comment or a question on Facebook. If you wouldn't mind maybe going to Facebook and answering the question there, is that okay?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, and then that way we can transition to Dan now, and then we'll get going here. So thanks again, Jordan. Thank you so
No,
much.
thank
Appreciate
you,
you taking the
Chris.
time.
Thanks for all your support. You really have been just a great help.
Oh, thank you. Anything we can do, we just want to get good candidates in there like yourself, and get them into office. So, all right. Well, let's make the transition. Dan, how are you doing?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you joining us. So let's see. Okay, Jordan is just now jumping off. Let me just make sure that this is give me 1 second here, make sure that this is working. I think everything's good. Yep, there we go. Oops. There we go. Okay, I have to mute. All right, so Dan, there's always a little bit of technical,
Yeah.
as you transition, I got to watch Facebook and YouTube. And anyway, thank you so much for being here, Dan. And
Hey, my pleasure.
yeah, let me just say this first. We have amazing candidates this year, and this is really turning out to be an incredible year for Republicans. I feel like the Republicans are just kind of tired of everything that's been going on over the last couple of years, and I'd say everybody is, not just Republicans. I think everybody's kind of frustrated, right? And so when you started to run, I don't know if you felt this way, but I felt like, man, this is going to be a super uphill battle. And it is. I don't want to say it's not, because we need to keep the foot on the pedal. But I see a lot of people from every party starting to say, yeah, maybe we went a little too far, right? A little too far to the left progressive ideas. And now they're coming back. And so now here you are as a candidate in this year. How do you feel about what's going on? How do you feel about the current race?
Well, about my race, my race is an uphill battle. If you've looked at our district's history and all the legislative seats that are around us here in Holiday, Mill Creek, Sugar House, East Murray, which is basically what constitutes Senate District 14. I don't think we've had a Republican legislator in any of these seats in 20 years. I think Steve Polton was the last one. And by the way, thanks, Steve, if you're listening, for the donation the other day. I think it's just been that long, and I don't know if it's because, obviously the demographics have changed over here, and there are, as the older generation is passing on, the houses have become very expensive, and a lot of people from California tend to buy into them, and a lot of the younger generation moves out more where you are. And because District 14 is basically right behind you, Chris. You can look your backdrop there, and you basically were nestled in there between Parley's Canyon and Mount Olympus and around the Beltway to East Murray. So the demographics here are tough. And so is it an uphill battle? I was telling my 97-year-old father the other day or this morning, he was on the phone. He said, "Dan, you're going to win that, right?" I said, "I don't know, Dad. It's going to be tough because you know how it is over here." And he grew up here. He's just going, "Oh, there's no way. There's no way they're not fed up with what's been going on, and he just can't imagine it." But we think it's tough. But my wife keeps telling me that she thinks it's doable. She's the reason I got into this. Fact, honey, come over here. The reason I am in this race is because of Jana, and
that's amazing.
She just thought, man, we are, with the last 2 years especially, she was particularly annoyed by encroachment of the state into our freedoms, and the censorship and the intrusiveness, the kind of the arrogance of even some of our local politicians, the way they approach the whole pandemic protocols, and so when I was, I had, Chris, I mean, if you look around, if you look at my background, you'll see I haven't been involved in the party or or politics. I mean, I've been a precinct chair, but I haven't been. I had no ambitions to run for office, and I've often engaged. I've always been very engaged and supportive of different people and different candidates, and always attend my caucus meetings and try to make my influence felt there as best I can. But I've just not been that interested in an actual pursuit of a public office. And I was sitting at home in March and enjoying the quiet house. Our youngest son had just left on a mission to Brazil, and four of we have 6 children. The 4 oldest are married, and the other one is down at BYU. And so I was just kind of enjoying the quiet of the evening, reading a book, and my phone starts to buzz, and I keep getting texts from my friend Matt Jarman, who'd been down at your meeting with you, and he pointed out to you guys that District 14 didn't have a Republican running. This was I think the night before the filing deadline.
Yeah.
And now you tell me if you remember it differently, but he told me, he said that, and you guys said, "Oh no, that's not possible. We got somebody there."
I honestly, no, it was a crazy time, and my goal was to make sure that we had somebody running in every race, because I didn't want to leave anything off the table. I wanted everything on the table. I wanted to get out there, work hard. And yeah, to be honest with you, I think yours was one of them that we thought we had a candidate and we didn't. And I was so glad he reached out and said, "Well, I know this guy." And once we realized, the situation, I was so glad you stepped up. That happened in a couple of the races, but and this is your time, not mine, but I'll just tell you.
Well, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
There's over 40 races in Salt Lake County that I'm trying to help to track, right? And so it was kind of hard to keep everything straight. And so when people like you step up, it warms my heart. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm so happy that people like you are stepping up. So thank you.
Well, like I said, he starts texting me on the way home from your meeting and said, "Dan, there's no candidate. There's no Republican running in our Senate district." And I said, "Oh, that's bad, And he's like, "Well, Dan, I told him I got the guy." And I said, "Oh, great. Great. Who is it, Matt?" "I'm ready to help." And he said, "Well, good, because it's you." And I said, "Oh, no, thanks, Matt. That's nice. I'm flattered, but that's not for me." And we went back and forth, and I went to bed and woke up the next morning, and Matt had left a few more texts with me telling me why I had to do it. And I said, "Matt, there's no way." And I said, "Even if I had the ambition to do this, my wife would never go for it." And I let him go, and I went for a run and came home and showered, got out of the shower. I came out to go to work, and Matt's sitting there at the kitchen table with my wife, Jana, who you just met. And they're filling out the paperwork. And she says, "Dan, Matt's right. You've got to do this. It's your duty." And so that's how I got into it. And I don't mean to tell that story to make it sound like I don't take this seriously. I do. I just
well, we're regular people. We've got regular families. We've got regular jobs. It's funny how the media portrays the party and politicians as these people who this is all we do, and the reality is no. We're I work a full-time job. I'm sure. I don't know if you're retired now, or I honestly don't know. So
nope, I'm running.
So you're.
So
yeah. Go ahead.
Fortunately, I have an insurance. Well, I'll just tell you, about my relationship with the area and the district. I grew up. I was born and raised in East Mill Creek, and I tell this probably partly because my opponent, is suing the legislature for gerrymandering, and she's part of that Better Boundaries Utah, or I'm not sure. I can't remember right, And she wrote it with Nate Bluen. She wrote I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, running for Senate in the next district over, but they combined and wrote an editorial in the Deseret News a while back about why they're suing the legislature, and how Mill Creek was divided up into 4 U.S. House districts, and how wrong that is, because House districts and all these voting districts, legislative districts, should be built around organic communities. And I just wrote a responding editorial, and the Deseret News published it a few weeks ago. How I just said, look, I grew up in East Mill Creek, and I know a little bit about the area, and I don't know what their relationship is with the community, but to say that District 14, for example, is not an organic community is really kind of absurd, because District 14 represents more of an organic community than Mill Creek City does. I mean, I'm sorry, Mill Creek City happens to be the city that all 4 congressional districts meet in for the state.
Yeah.
But they've got to meet somewhere. And frankly,
Right.
Mill Creek City is not, Mill Creek City, I know the mayor would probably hate to hear me say this, but it was kind of cobbled together, of what was left of unincorporated Salt Lake County. You had
Yeah.
Salt Lake City coming out to about the I-80, about I-80, and then you had Holiday City coming over from the other direction, and we had just this area of East Mill Creek and West Mill Creek that was never incorporated, and so they kind of slapped it together, and they've tried to make it into it's fine, it's a city, but it's not like we have more common interests with the people, in the west part of Mill Creek City than we do with the people of Holiday. I mean, we've gone to school. I was raised, going to school with the people that went to Highland and Skyline and Olympus and Cottonwood high schools. We all had friendly rivalries. We all intermarried, from these areas. And I mean, it's a very organic place, this district. And
Yeah.
And I worked in Sugar House as a teenager in my grandfather's furniture business there, and then eventually established my own insurance business in Murray, which is part of the district. So, as far as I'm concerned, this district was my married children have all moved back into the area. One's in Murray, the Murray part of the district, one's in the Holiday part of the district, and one's in the East Mill Creek part of the district with my 5 grandkids. So
Yeah.
it's as organic as you can get,
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just talking to Jordan about this. Jordan's from where, he's a local guy, right? Where he's representing. You're a local guy where you're representing. I think that's amazing, because you truly do represent the community, and I think that's awesome. So let me ask you this, because we don't have a whole lot of time, and we can go over a little bit, by the way. It's kind of up to you, but no, you're good. But what I want to ask you, what is the main thing that you want to accomplish as a senator when you win? I'm going to say when you win, okay? So
yeah, my highest priorities really are to push back a little bit on what has become, even to me, has become too big of a Republican government. Even I just feel like, and it's nothing against the party. I mean, the party has a great platform, and I think it's the party platform is so sound. But we've seen our governor and our past governor get a little too big for their britches, and they've, when they just get into getting way outside of their lane, as far as, I believe in government. I don't believe that government doesn't have a role. I'm not a pure anarchist or libertarian that way, but I do believe it has a very limited role, and an important role, but limited. And if we can keep it in its lane and sticking to the things that it is supposed to do and do them well, then let's help the government and the bureaucracy focus on those things. Let's help them focus on infrastructure. we've got a lot of growth in Utah. It requires a lot of expertise and help from the government and the municipalities to make that happen and make it happen appropriately so that growth can happen in an orderly way. Criminal justice, civil justice, sanitation services, public utilities. These things we really do need government to focus on and to do them well. We don't need, the governor worried about what people, I don't know, worried about what people are doing with their kids. Or, I know you guys were just talking about some of those more cultural issues, some of the issues surrounding
Social,
transgender and gender transition surgeries and how the state can be involved in that. And I'm not as interested in that unless we do have cases of abuse, and that comes down to some definition of what is abuse and what is not. I prefer to leave most of that to parents, children, and the way they want to pursue their lives. I don't. Sorry. Uh-oh.
okay.
Did I lose you, Chris? There you are.
No, you're still there. You're good. Yeah, you're good.
I've got I really think that I'm probably a little more prone to leave those issues as much as possible to families and individuals. In that same sense, I do think we need to watch out since the state does sponsor our public school system, the state does have a role is forced into a role with what's being taught and what programs the schools are putting out there, and the transgender issue, and the girls' sports is for girls. There's a reason that we established girls' sports in the first place. So the state does have to get involved. It can be forced to. So I have no problem with what the state has had to do in some of those areas, but as much as possible, let parents and children work these things out, and that's really, COVID-19, the Corona regime, that imposed such draconian new protocols, the likes I never imagined we would see right here in Utah, even in Utah, and especially in Salt Lake County.
Can I just comment on what you started out by saying, the Republicans? Let me just clarify something that I always like to clarify. The party are the people, and the people, the people who have joined the party, and we have a set of principles that's in the platform. And so what you said, I absolutely agree. Once you're an elected official, I almost wish we could just sever those elected officials from the party, because some of the things they do have nothing to do with the principles of our party. And
Right.
And I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying, but let's be honest, they no more represent the Republican Party than a delegate or a precinct chair. We nominate the people who we think are going to represent us the best, but sometimes when they get into office, they don't. And and everyone will agree or disagree on whether they do or not. That's not the point. They no longer are the leaders of the party. The leaders of the party are still the people. And I'm just a chair. Literally all I do as a chair is I organize things. I organize this town hall. I organized our meetings. I make sure the delegates have a place to get together so that their voice can be heard. My whole point in being chair is to optimize and make
Right.
sure their voices are heard, right? So I actually love what you said. I don't disagree with you at all. I think some of our elected Republicans may not represent the Republican Party, or they may or may not. I'm not trying to attack anybody, but they may or may not represent the party as our principles are stated in the platform. And so to your point, I completely agree with you.
And that's fine. They can, they're elected officials and they've got to face their constituents, and I would just encourage the constituents, my fellow constituents, to consider more carefully what our public officials are doing, not so much as party affiliates, but as
Right.
elected officials who have sworn an oath to the Constitution. And
Yes.
I don't need so much, organizations and sponsors and special interest groups telling us what to do, or even, in the case of the past 2 years with coronavirus politics, the science says this, or, we're quoting, everybody was trying to catch up on their getting a handle on epidemiology, and
Yeah.
we're all just over our heads, and even the epidemiologists were over their heads. But I'll tell you that the place they were most over their heads was in constitutional liberty, and
Right.
that is we don't take an oath to medical journals. We don't take an oath to anything other than the Constitution, and
I love that.
and the
Yep.
Constitution contains a Bill of Rights. And when you start violating those one by one in the name of science or political correctness, you've got to do a little review. And I would just encourage voters to really, really reconsider that, because the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are not just some historical document. They were written with deep wisdom and great care and deep humanity. And they are there to establish order in a manner that will allow the most freedom possible. And every time we encroach on freedom, every time we grow the bureaucracy of the government or empower some public official, we are reducing individual liberty. And that's why I just think Republican governor, whatever, Democrat, whatever you are,
Doesn't matter.
just remember to stay in your lane. Do the things you're asked to do and do them well, but leave the rest to us. Leave our lives to us to pursue. I really think there's every single piece of legislation or public policy proposal that comes forth can be measured against those three unalienable rights mentioned in the Declaration, and later, really put into law in the Constitution: the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to pursue happiness. And if we respect those three things, if we truly respect those three things, we will have good government.
Yeah, I absolutely. I thank you so much for saying that. And one thing I'd like to add to that is, what I think is most important is that those are God-given rights, not government-granted rights, not, individual. No group within the United States should be able to give or take away those rights, because God already gave them to us. And that's one thing that, and I won't go on too much, but that's one thing that when people say, oh, we live in a democracy. No. A democracy allows voters to take away those rights, take away those liberties. We live in a republic where that's not an option, where you and all the other elected officials are here to uphold the Constitution that clearly states that you're here to defend those God-given rights. And so that's why when somebody says we live in a democracy, I get so frustrated, because we don't. We live in a republic, and they think, oh, it's the same thing. It's not. It's very, very different. So anyway, off my soapbox. We're here about you. So
No, I totally agree. And it's there to protect minority rights. Even more than that, it's there to protect individual rights. And
exactly.
Every time somebody asks me a question, during this campaign about, do you support so-and-so rights or this group's rights or that group's rights, I'm going, yeah, but not as a group. I support the rights of every individual that group may claim to have some jurisdiction over. But right. To me, the only jurisdiction governing that person's rights is the Constitution. And the Constitution declares those among other rights, but it declares life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think so wisely, and even in that order, because without life, none of the other rights matter. And liberty, you can apply that to you don't intrude upon people's personal liberty. government just doesn't intrude. It has no place intruding on people's personal liberty as long as they are not violating somebody else's. And then the pursuit of happiness. That's an unalienable right that we're endowed with by our Creator. I think that was just so wise and brilliantly phrased, because, you know, I think if you look at the history on that, how that evolves, Jefferson had written The Pursuit of Property in there, and the pragmatist Franklin, you know, thought maybe open it up a little bit. And I think that was really wise, because there's so many things that each and every individual may pursue that a lot of people may think are inappropriate, but the Constitution is there saying no, or the Declaration in that case saying no, that is, every individual is allowed to pursue whatever they think is worthwhile. And so there are a lot of applications you could apply that to, but my point with that is that every piece of legislation, I really think, can be measured against those three things. And if it doesn't guarantee those three things, if it violates any of those three things, you better rethink it. You'll have to rethink it in my case.
Yep. No, I thank you so much for focusing on those things. Now I'm gonna just ask you this, because I've seen people who've run as candidates feel the same way you do today. And then once they're up there on the Hill, then the question becomes, how do I apply this, right? So tell me, what's your thought process when you're put in a situation where you're like, wow, you know, option A and option B that are being proposed don't actually fit don't fit within that, you know, that realm of you know, what you feel is maybe constitutional. How do you deal with that? How do you I'm trying to think of a good example. Can't think of one at the moment, so I apologize, but I've seen this happen, and then the legislators are left trying to figure out, you know,
well,
what do I do? So what's your thought process?
I kind of know what you're getting at, and you know, I'd like to think of myself as a purist, and that I will just stick to that pure, you know, standard of life, liberty, and the pursuit, protecting those. I do think I will. I think I'm pretty committed to it, but I am not. Granted, I am not an experienced legislator. Again, this is my first run for any public office, so I'm realistic about the pressures that will come down, and you know, I've been told that rookies in the legislature get eaten alive. but maybe part of what I would rely on and could count on is the fact that I don't have ambition to be there. I really don't.
Yeah.
To me, it will be a sacrifice to go and spend my especially my winter, because I love those mountains behind you, and I do spend a lot of time skiing and playing in those mountains in the winter, and so that would really cramp my style. But more than that, I mean, it's just not my first priority to be there. But so I think that is going to be helpful in maintaining my standards that way. I don't think I'll be easily moved by the possibility of being unseated in 4 years. And so I will have a lot of appetite for saying no to things that do step into the violation of those principles. And I am deeply committed to serving as a representative of my fellow citizens, my neighbors, every one of them. And so I will take personally any violation of any of their rights and freedoms. So I don't know if that's getting exactly what you're saying. If that it probably would be good to have an example of an issue.
No, I apologize. I was trying to, as you're talking, I was trying to think of another example, and I just, it's hard because I've seen over the, well, okay, let's just, of course, this is more of a county issue right now, but you know, the gondola, you know, I mean, it's a tough, it's a not, you can't really call it a constitutional issue, but it is an important issue, right?
Well, I think
And
that's a great example. I mean, again, apply these principles.
yeah,
I really think these principles can be applied to even that. First of all, that's public land that they want to
Mhm.
put that on. So right there, you have a problem. You've got to justify, basically developing that canyon in a massive way. Something's very intrusive. So there's the environmental impact that violates the people's public property. That's at least it's very intrusive. Let's not use violate, but at the very least, it's very intrusive. And so the public has a right to challenge that. And furthermore, what right does the legislature have to put that burden and that cost on the entire population of the state, to demand that of every income earner in the state to pay for that? Most of them aren't skiers, believe it or not. Most Utahns do not ski, and definitely most of them do not ski in Little Cottonwood Canyon. I do. I ski there all the time. And I would love to have an easier time getting up and down the canyon on the powder days, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about what, a dozen, if that, days a year that you've got this massive congestion in the canyon. And I've been in it many times. And to me, it's a skier problem. It's not a state problem. It's a skier problem. And I speak that, I speak as one of them. And so I think that's our problem. I think that those of us and we don't really have the right to impose that upon the rest of the population in any way.
I couldn't remember exactly where your district, where it fit, but I guess it's below your district. So yeah.
It's just out,
but still,
the canyon is just outside my district. We have Mill Creek Canyon, Parley's Canyon, and then we go just about to Big Cottonwood Canyon around the Beltway there. So my it's obviously a big issue in my district. Everybody,
and it'll affect everybody when it comes down to the taxes and everything else. So.
Yeah, but to ask the rest of our fellow citizens throughout the state to pay for that, to solve that problem for us, makes no sense to me. And I don't see the morality in it or the practicality of it. So
yeah, I've gone back and forth, to be honest with you. I've looked at it from different angles, and I actually like your take, because you're right. Whose problem is it really? It's really the skiers, right? They're the ones who want to get up.
And the neighbors,
that
live at the base of Little Cottonwood Canyon. They have a real problem. And so
I imagine they live there because they like to ski, though. That would be my guess.
And frankly, I don't see how the gondola helps too much with that, because everybody's going to be driving to the gondola station, right? Or the bus station that takes you to the gondola.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to be crowding in for that. So, there are so many ways that and here's the other thing, Chris, is let the market work things out as much as possible. The market usually does work things out. And we even noticed, last year, we've been lifelong season ticket holders at Alta. We noticed last year when Alta imposed a parking reservation system, that it greatly alleviated a lot of those problems. And last year was actually not bad compared to previous years. So Alta did that. Snowbird didn't. I just wonder if Snowbird did that. You just and then there's the people just getting sick of it. Who's willing to put up with that? And if you're not willing to put up with it, eventually you kind of maybe I'll just ski Park City, and
go to the next,
and
go to the next mountains there. Right?
Yeah. And eventually, I just think that market works things out. We just sometimes you have to be a little more patient, but before you go building like the pumps at Great Salt Lake, you were not around when I was just in my early 20s when the big controversy about should we build the pumps at the Great Salt Lake, because back at that point 30 years ago the lake was threatening to flood farmland, and they were talking about the airport being in trouble, and you know, they got the pumps built. They were controversial, but they pushed them through and got them approved and spent all the money to build them. And by the time they were built, the lake was dropping again. and so, you know, these massive projects that the government tends to get excited about, and there's always special interests involved in them. Always money to be made in all these things. You know, you got to be careful. You just, I prefer a little bit of patience before, you know, jumping. The government's always telling us, you know, politicians are always telling us it's a crisis right now. We've got to solve it, you know? And I'm just like, you know, stay calm and let's think it through. Give it a little bit of time.
One of your future peers here, Dan McKay, was at an event last night. He said almost the exact same thing you just said. And he says that if somebody's telling you it's a crisis, says don't listen to them, especially if it's coming from the media. he says wait it out a little bit, listen, you know, pay attention. But if they're telling you it's a crisis, it's there's probably somebody who's going to benefit from it maybe a little more personally than they should. And it was interesting to hear him talk, and I agree. And sometimes we need to just kind of wait it out a little bit, understand what's going on, not always jump to conclusions. And so I agree with that.
Well, good for Dan. I'm glad to hear he's saying that as an insider there, because, you know, it usually is politicians backed by special interests that are the biggest crisis peddlers, you know. And get us all worked up. I mean, they're constantly getting us worked up about, you know, whether it's the virus or whether it's the drought or, you know, whether it's climate or even, I mean, man, the war in Ukraine, how'd that become a crisis for Utah? You know, how did our governor and mayors get involved in that? You know, it's just, you know, stay in your lane.
Yeah, I felt like that was a distraction, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, not that it should, I hate to ever call anything a distraction where there's so many people in a crisis like that, but it really stay in your lane, right? And stay
in your lane
true,
and stick to business and let people live their lives. We'll have more peace and more prosperity.
Well, Dan, I this has been a great opportunity for me to get to know you better. You're one of the candidates. I'll be honest. I don't know very well as well as I should, and it's kind of embarrassing to say as the chair.
I know we didn't get any money from you.
Man.
Okay.
I feel bad.
It's okay. We're fine. We're good. We got, you know, we haven't been, we've got, all of our support has come from just individuals. So it's just been
good.
It's been really rewarding. It's been great. We don't owe anybody but the individual citizens of this district.
I'd rather be that way. And I'll tell you that the party, we're at a shoestring budget. I tell everybody that. They have no idea. Everyone thinks the party's flush with money. And and what that means is candidates like yourself are out there raising funds and you're getting to know people and you've got to convince them that, hey, this is the right thing for Utah and you're doing it. And then I look and I don't like to bash the other party, but if you go look at the money that comes in at the other party, which is a small minority in Utah, and yet they get hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. And I don't know about you, but I think the average for the House races is anywhere from $15,000 to $40,000 spent per race. Well, that's incredibly small, at least for the Republicans. Whereas the Democrats have far more money. So the party, we run on a shoestring budget. Every single person is a volunteer. Whereas other parties have 8, 10 full-time employees that are doing the things that we do. And yet we're the majority party. And so this isn't a response to what you just said. I just in general.
I'm kind of just.
I know you were kidding about that. I know.
I really am glad that it's worked out like it has. I'm really, really pleased. And, you know, my opponent, you know, she's sponsored by the AFL-CIO and Planned Parenthood and Equality Utah and, you know, all these organizations. So, you know, you're going to have a representative in the Senate from this area that's either sponsored and represents organizations, or you're going to have one that represents you, literally you who live here,
locally,
my neighbors, my fellow citizens, and as it should be. That's who our government is meant to represent. And so I
Well,
intend.
It's been an honor talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time. We kind of need to wrap it up here. We're we're well over what we were supposed to be, but that's good. This has been a great conversation. It's been great getting to know you. We've had quite a few viewers. I didn't see any new questions, but if there are any, I'd encourage you to go to Facebook or YouTube and answer them if you don't mind. If I'll try to send them to you so you can answer them.
That's because they see how
thanks.
long my answers are, Chris, so they don't dare ask.
They're afraid. I know that I do that to people all the time too. So they say, "Oh man, this person talks too much. I don't want to ask him questions." But that's good. That means we're opinionated, right? But thanks again for being here. Thanks for running. I look forward. Hopefully we'll be at the event on November 8th, and we encourage people to attend that. We're calling it the Victory Party in hopes that it is a major victory. I'll send you the details about that, but it's going to be at the Hyatt Regency downtown on the 8th. So love to have you there and to celebrate the end of the election, if nothing else, right? So
yeah.
Thank you so much again, Dan. Any last words you want to say before we end this one?
No, thank you. I appreciate the time and just encourage all my fellow neighbors and friends here in Sugar House, Mill Creek, Murray, and Holiday to make it count.
All right. Thank you. Well, I will say one last thing. Don't wait last minute to vote. We have a snowstorm coming, and this is one of the things that's been concerning me. That's why I like to see the early voters, because, for example, caucus night, it was we had about maybe a little more than half turnout that we expected because of the snowstorm. So please get out there, vote early. Turn in your ballots. My preference is to turn in a ballot into the ballot box so that it goes through as few hands as possible. But I promise you, it does get counted. I've walked through the process myself, but this is how we do it in Utah. So
vote.
The
Democrats say vote early, vote often.
Yeah. We just say vote early and vote alive. No, I'm just kidding. Don't vote when you're dead. Yeah.
Hey,
anyway, thanks again, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Take care. All right.